serialized for the Sunday Times or any other tabloids as well, so you'll only be able to hear it today. A little bit about history around Mark. He's from Sheldon. Mark Sheldon, Birmingham born and bred. After a degree in computer science and a career in project management, consultancy and energy firms, he spotted a rising demand among businesses when it came to AI and data, specifically around predictive analytics. And fast forward 4 years, Mark has sold the company to Sidetrade, and he's now Group CTO and recently opened the company's newest tech hub centre in the centre of Birmingham, backed by a 30 million investment for new jobs in R&D and community engagement. Mark's going to share his story today around how he got to the position he is in now. So thanks very much, Mark. Welcome to the talk. Perhaps for the members of the audience, a bit more of a informal introduction to yourself and your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Sunil. Welcome, everyone. And thanks for joining this afternoon. Great to have a few people on the call. So yeah, a little bit of an intro to me, a bit of background. So obviously I'm Mark. I'm now the Group CTO at a company called Sidetrade. So Sidetrade, for those of you who don't know, we're one of Europe's leading AI software vendors. Predominantly, we sell to large B2B organizations, companies, big brands like Expedia and so on. And we predominantly help them to optimize their cash collection through software and AI. I joined Sidetrade probably 4 years ago now, actually through an acquisition, as Sunil just described. So I was previously the founder of a predictive analytics machine learning startup called BrightTarget. So I've spent the last 7 or so years helping organizations to implement AI, obviously built a startup, and as well as kind of running both small and large engineering teams.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Mark. And I think everyone's really interested in the journey to, where you started from in terms of founding your own business and your own technology business, and then the evolution to where you are now. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit more about the journey in the early days.
Yeah, sounds good. I think the big word there is journey. It was definitely a journey. So it started off probably 10 years ago. So I was in lots of conversations over many beers, quite convinced that there was a better way for businesses to use AI, specifically, using it as more of a SaaS model rather than a expensive kind of consultancy or in-house type option. And if you think back 10 years, this is way before the kind of AI buzz was out there. So this was back in the early days of just some of the really big vendors using some stats back in the day. So I convinced a friend of mine who actually ran a data consultancy at the time to do something, and I guess he really became my first mentor in the space. Then teamed up with another really smart guy who was ex director of Virgin Media and had done a lot of this kind of predictive analytics in the real world. And The 3 of us started BrightTarget at that point. It wasn't actually called BrightTarget then, but we meandered along under a different name. And I think the product and the concept that we worked on have evolved a lot for probably a couple of years, actually. So we didn't just go there and build something and sell it. It's never that easy. No, we went along a big journey at that point. So it's probably 2 years of what I would describe as kissing a lot of frogs at the time. Lots of meetings, lots of calls.
Ironic, now you work for a French company.
Lots of people telling you that it wasn't going to work as well, and lots of late nights. So, but eventually, we did get some traction. And actually, the first we did a lot of kind of pilots and a lot of freebies. But eventually, we did close what turned out to be a pretty significant first deal, which was to a FTSE 250 company. It's quite impressive when you think only a little tiny company, and it was a 100K ARR deal. So for a little SaaS company to get to that point as your first deal, it was a big milestone.
ARR for the listeners is annualized recorded revenue, so it's the annualized contract value.
Yeah, recurring revenue. So it was a big deal for a SaaS company. And then I think the next big breakthrough really came by getting recognised by Gartner in a market guide for predictive analytics, which was a very emerging market at the time. And again, for a kind of little SaaS company that had self-funded to that point, that was a big milestone for us to get recognised. And at that point, we kind of were thinking, well, maybe we should look at growing faster. Maybe we should look at a Series A type funding round. But pretty shortly after that, really, when we got a call from Olivier Navasque, the founder of Sidetrade, and I guess the rest is history at that point. And we were acquired later.
How was he made aware of you? Do you know actually how he came across you? Did he Google, AI companies or predictive analytic companies?
As far as I'm aware, it was actually from that Gartner guide that he found. So that was, hence for me, that was a big, big part of the adventure. Actually, was getting recognised by the analysts in this space.
Excellent. And obviously, we hear a lot of behind every success there's always lots of failures, etc. In your words, being an entrepreneur, what are some of the best parts and what are some of the worst parts? But maybe concentrate more on the best parts because it's Friday. We want to leave in a good mood.
Yeah, because it's Friday. Let's start with the worst. I think it definitely takes over your life at some point. I think many founders will probably agree with me. It becomes a bit of an obsession. Often, I think, because you're taking so much risk, you're almost desperate for it to work. And I think actually one of the biggest challenges for any entrepreneur is knowing when to walk away. But you're in so deep, it's very difficult to walk away. But I think the best part is, you're free. You've got the chance to change the world and do what you think is right, which is pretty awesome. Not many people get to experience that. I think the reality is it's somewhere in between. It's a massive roller coaster ride. You get the real highs of closing the deals, of meeting customers that love what you do, and then you get the lows of everyone telling you it won't work and you're never going to make it, and customers saying no and leaving you and stopping paying you. So it's a real mix between what is amazing and terrible all at the same time, in my experience.
Understood. Excellent. And any advice really around aspiring entrepreneurs? I think one of the things you mentioned was around getting a mentor, which you alluded to as well. But apart from finding a mentor, any other bits of advice that you would offer to people who want to have a similar journey?
Yeah, I think if you're a youngster just setting out on this kind of journey, you've got an idea or you're a techie with some talent and you want to do something, I think getting a mentor is 100% what I would suggest you should do first. Obviously, that's not the case for some founders that have been there and got the t-shirt already, but I think working together for me was a big thing. I think trying to do it on your own feels almost impossible. You need that mix of skills. I think you need all sorts of there's lots of benefit to share the pain as well, to be honest. When you're going through really tough times, it's good to have someone else there to bounce ideas off and to go through it together.
Right.
So I think that's definitely another point. I think I mentioned it already, but you've got to go through this process of being able to go out there, speak to a hell of a lot of people, kiss a lot of frogs, as we say, and be able to handle the rejection. It's a pretty brutal world, I think, being an entrepreneur. I think you need to, so many people would tell you it's not going to work, and you've got to really believe deep down that it will. That's what keeps you motivated and keeps you going. But equally, I think you need this ability to react and pivot, as they would say. I think the reality, you see this in almost all startups fail because they don't find what they call product market fit.
Right.
Where you get the product that is and the demand from the market at the same time. And you see companies like Airbnb, these guys, they started out with the idea of renting air mattresses. At one stage, they were selling breakfast cereal to try and raise money, and they ended up building a $30 billion company. So wherever you set out, you should not be convinced that is where you're going to end up. So be prepared to change. And probably the last point would be around, being able to sacrifice and work ridiculously hard. I think there's no doubt that is something that happens for most entrepreneurs, at least.
It's a good point you raise as well about the pivoting. And if you look at companies like Amazon as well, that started off selling books basically, and if you look at where they are now, Tesla as well is very similar as well in terms of their innovation. It's almost like they become more innovation businesses, and they invest so much in that, and they've just changed so much in those early days. But that's great advice. Thank you very much, Mark. And now you've reached the heady heights of CTO at Sidetrade. I know when you come in the office, you demand rose petals are thrown down in front of you.
Correct.
But apart from that, can you tell us a little bit more about the role at Sidetrade in terms of what you do as CTO, please?
Yeah, it's very different from those days, that's for sure. So yeah, manage a team of probably about 85 people now, so including support, operations, and all of the kind of engineering function at Sidetrade. So yeah, very different from the world of meetings, sales meetings, and trying to build a product on your own or with just one or two people. So lots of different challenges, but it's super exciting for me to go from trying to get a startup off the ground to trying to get a scale up to really scale. So if I look at,
is there a sense of relief though with that as well though, now that you've got more people behind you? Now it's not just you're part of a larger organization. Does that allow you to be a bit more relaxed and a bit more less stressed and and have that relief of a big company, or do you think that puts a bit more pressure on because now you're responsible for more people?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a little bit of a mix, if I'm honest. With 85 people comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of pain, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of good and bad. You just get very different challenges, to be totally honest.
Understood.
But I think if I look at where we've come from a Sidetrade point of view, when I joined, we were at around 60 million market cap euros, and today we're at about 150. So it's quite impressive in terms of the trajectory. We're on a big growth curve. So the focus is really on building something that's scalable, so a scalable organization and a scalable product. So I think it's just completely different, the challenges that we have today. But I think a lot of the success, if you asked Olivier, the founder, if you asked a lot of the sales team, I think a lot of the success for me comes down to the innovation over the last few years. So having an AI product that's effectively a market leader is a game changer, I think. So that focus on innovation is still there, even if it's at a different scale.
Understood. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And again, moving from that role of entrepreneur to CTO, we talked about, some of the relief, but also more pressure as well. It's almost like amplified. But what are the challenges now typically you're facing in the role as a CTO?
Yeah, I think we touched on it. Really, it is all about people and culture now. So how do we, I guess, and you could extend to say, well, people, culture, and we want to build the best product in the world. I mean, that's the challenge for any kind of CTO engineering team. But to build the best product in the world, it starts with the people and it starts with the culture that you build. So lots of stuff that we work on, lots of challenges for me around how we get that group of 85, which will be soon 100 plus. How do we get them working really optimally? How do we get them innovating? And how do we get them to? We want to make Sidetrade the place where all techies want to work.
Absolutely.
And once you start there, you don't want to leave there. So that's my challenge as a CTO.
And it must be just a little bit trickier at the moment, obviously with COVID, regional lockdowns, and our policy at the moment not being in the office unless urgent or required to try and keep that motivation and that communication, collaboration going between the teams as well. So that brings another set of challenges, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, it's been really hard in my opinion to keep that momentum, keep that real positivity in the team. I think it's been up and down in my opinion.
Right.
In terms of the morale of the team and trying to keep the morale high, it's been really, really difficult. And we've tried to do things like run virtual events, run virtual hackathons.
Yeah.
Virtual social events. There's lots of stuff we're trying to do to keep that momentum.
Sure.
But it's definitely really tough, and I'm sure other CTOs and other companies and teams are experiencing the same pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, the sooner we get back to the office and start functioning normally, the better, particularly from your point of view, from an IT perspective.
Yeah, I think we've probably learned though there's a balance in my opinion. We used to be very office based. I would say, we'd hire very regionally around our offices. But I think the new world is going to be much more flexible.
Brilliant.
Is my opinion, especially for us at least. I think we've all learned that there's probably a balance in between where we were, that it leads to a much healthier balance.
Excellent, excellent. And since the road onto entrepreneurship and then the move to the CTO, what's been your sort of apart from working with me, obviously, but your other proudest achievement?
Yeah, it's probably I would say proudest achievement so far would be building a company and getting it acquired. I think that is number one. But I would say that is so far. I would not be.
I was going to say,
I would not
you're
be
so
at
young.
Sidetrade unless I thought we could do something quite special. So fingers crossed, we keep going as we are.
I'm with you. And we did touch on it just a moment ago, but I think it's worth maybe talking in it a little bit more kind of wider around the management of the COVID crisis. And you mentioned already that there's some pros and cons. I think you picked up on a good point about having a wider talent pool now as a result of not being tied to the office. But how's Sidetrade at handling the COVID crisis, would you say, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think we're working really hard to come out stronger, in honesty. For us, I really don't like using the word luck, because I don't think any of it is luck. Actually, I think the strengths of our business that have been there from day one, around the SaaS business model, 80% of our revenue recurring, and the fact our core product is actually around organizations to collect their cash in a downturn economy. That becomes an essential tool. None of that is luck. That's how we've positioned ourselves. But that means we are in a very strong position to kind of get through this. But I think also it makes you focus on the innovation side. These kind of events, these kind of black swan type events, really make you think about how you can maximize your position, I guess, to move forward. We've done lots of stuff around innovating around new product launches, giving companies our product in terms of cash collection for free to try and trial. So they can make the most of it during this kind of crisis period, and obviously for us to showcase the benefit of it. Also things like the invoice tracker tool that we've developed over the past 6 months. So this is where we're effectively using the data that we collect in our data lake, in our network of payments, to be able to show how businesses are paying invoices or not, as the case may be. So we can showcase the risk around the pandemic, and it's super interesting for customers. I think analysts and a lot of governments have even been interested in this. It's a cool topic. I mean, you can go and find it. If you look at sidetrade.com, you'll find the invoice tracker if you're interested in taking a look.
Absolutely. I think the invoice tracker as well is a really good example of the innovation and agility that's come to Sidetrade since you took the CTO role as well. Because when you started off looking at your roadmap at the beginning of the year, it wasn't even on the agenda, but the ability to turn around that idea into a concept, to publish it, all the supporting data. I think it shows a few things. It shows, first of all, the data attributes that we have and the access we have to the volumes of data, and it's so current. It also, I think, shows all the skills that we have in your teams in particular to able, make sense of the data and then to present it. And I think the other thing it shows is the ability for us to work with other people by offering it, for free, and allowing other agencies to use it to help them make decisions as well around what's happening from an economic point of view in Europe too. And I think someone's just posted actually a link on the chat for the invoice tracker. So I think it's a really good example of the kind of that new innovative approach that you've brought to Sidetrade, certainly. And I know it's a bit difficult, but if you were to stare into that large crystal ball of yours and look into 2021, Mark, give it a good rub, and then have a look at it, and then tell us what you think it's going to look like in the tech sector in 2021 for us. I dare you.
Maybe you could go first on this question.
Okay. I think, thank you. I think there's going to be much more of a more rapid move to cloud, in my opinion. I think organizations, particularly with furlough, people not coming into the office, have recognized that actually they need to be able to work anywhere and collect cash from anywhere. So I think particularly for Sidetrade, I think that's really positive. I think the other thing it did was test people's business contingency planning. And I think organizations that did well were able to pivot from a office traditional culture to an outside culture. I think that's highlighted some kind of winners there as well. So I think that all looks into that kind of area.
Yeah, I think also, I 100% agree with you. I think digitization is going to be massive. It's sped up digitization without a doubt. I think it was a key key topic already, but a lot of what we would say legacy businesses were moving quite slowly, in my opinion.
Absolutely,
And
it's
I think this is
accelerated that.
supercharged that topic. So I fully agree.
I think the other thing as well, Mark, from specifically a Sidetrade point of view, is that the AR or accounts receivable has always been the poor relation in terms of working cap. You know, typically it's AP inventory that gets all the attention. But I think AR in particular has really gone up the agenda of the CFO and the board because its cash is so vital now, and its importance to organisations has really been highlighted as a result of this global liquidity crisis as well. So I think from a technology point of view, I think certainly for us, I think it's going to be really interesting as well.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think if we look probably broader, I think this, in my opinion, the pandemic is going to strengthen the kind of the big tech players. You know, your Amazons, from a retail point of view, and also from a cloud point of view. You know, your Amazons, your Microsofts, all of these guys, in my opinion, are just going to get stronger through this situation. But time will tell. But that's the feeling for me so far.
Absolutely.
I think your SaaS vendors with your strong recurring revenue models. I've already kind of mentioned that. I think companies like your Salesforce and obviously Sidetrade, you're going to hopefully see these companies, go through the other side and come out stronger. I think if you just look from a pure techie point of view, I think I'm hoping that we're going to see some kind of big breakthrough in the kind of quantum computing space. I think it's a really hot space. Lots of people have been investing their cash in this space over the last, I don't know, probably 2 to 3 years now. I think it could be an absolute game changer for things like AI specifically, which then have big or massive knock-on impacts for things like computer modeling, health, even like vaccine development, which is quite apt at the moment. These kind of things. I really expect something big to come out in 21 in that space.
Excellent. And I think also just on that kind of tech sector, I think IBM is a great example. It's it was a huge kind of monolith type organization, and recently they announced a split where one side's going to concentrate on the legacy and the new business is going to concentrate on the cloud hosting and all those sorts of areas. So I think I think you're absolutely right, that whole thing around digitization, the move to cloud, and removing barriers between people and their customers to really make it a much more slicker process. I think it's going to be a real focus. And finally, do you have any interesting or inspiring lessons you've picked up from other tech leaders and can maybe leave on a positive note?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest lesson I've learned, I think, from successful entrepreneurs, leaders, I think whether it depends what your definition of success is. Whether you're trying to build, if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to build a lifestyle business, to free yourself, or whether you're trying to build the next unicorn. For me, generally speaking, I think success is 99% hard work. That's what I've seen. I don't think you can expect something to happen. You need to make it happen.
Understood. And we've got a few more minutes, everyone. So just before Mark gives us his contact details and how we can find him and stalk him on LinkedIn, if you've got any questions, please do post them in the chat, or you'll just raise your hand. I'd love to answer any questions you have. We've got about 10 minutes. So please feel free to ask any questions you have. It's very simple. Just go into the chat icon, and then you can just type your question into the box, hit the arrow, and then it'll appear. And we can then get we can get Mark or myself to answer it. So please do ask. And just Mark, while we're waiting for any questions to come in, if people want to just follow you, just I take it obviously usual kind of channels.
Yeah, if you probably LinkedIn's probably, the easiest. Probably just search for Mark Sheldon, you should find me. And also, if you want to email me directly, feel free to. So it's msheldon@sidetrade.com. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Mark. So thanks very much for joining us today, Mark. I really appreciate all the insights you've shared. I think it's been really fascinating to hear firsthand from your experiences of how you started and where you are. I think you're absolutely right. The future, particularly at Sidetrade, looks very, very positive, not just on the this year's growth, but also what we have planned in the future as well, and all the fantastic changes and models you're applying to your team. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out afterwards as well. Please do visit the Sidetrade website too. From Q1 next year, Sidetrade is going to be recruiting very heavily again using their tech hub model. But also we do have open headcount at the moment. So please, again, visit the careers page at Sidetrade if you think you've got something to offer us. Love to hear from you. Anything else you'd like to add, Mark?
No, just thanks very much for joining, everyone, and enjoy your weekend.
Fantastic. Thanks all. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Bye for now.